Miles never questioned his mother's instructions, just delivered the envelope every Friday to the man in the black car. It was a simple task, a harmless routine, or so he thought. But in the middle of his parents' divorce hearing, a single slip changed everything. He mentioned the envelopes. The courtroom fell silent. His mother's face drained of color. The judge leaned in, and then came the question that sent chills down everyone's spine. Miles, do you know what you were delivering? What was inside those envelopes, and why was his mother so afraid? Watch until the end to uncover this chilling secret. Miles was 7 the first time his mother handed him an envelope. It was thick, sealed tight, and smelled faintly of her perfume. She crouched down, holding it carefully between her fingers, her voice calm but firm. "Sweetie, I need you to do something for me," she said. "Take this to the black car at the corner. Just hand it to the man inside, and remember, this stays between us, okay?" Miles didn't understand why, but his mother's voice made it clear. This was important. So, he nodded. She smiled, kissed the top of his head, and sent him off. The night air was cool, the street unusually quiet. Miles walked with the envelope clutched in both hands. The black car was right where she said it would be, its engine off, its tinted windows almost blending into the darkness. As he reached the curb, the window rolled down just a few inches. A pale hand slipped through the gap, waiting. Miles hesitated. The man inside didn't speak. He didn't even move. Just that hand, reaching. Miles placed the envelope in it. The fingers curled around it, and without a word the window slid back up. A moment later the car pulled away, and that was it. The next Friday it happened again, then the next. After a while Miles stopped wondering why. It was just another part of his routine, like brushing his teeth or setting the table for dinner. Every week his mother would hand him the envelope, and he would take it to the black car. The man inside never said a word, never looked at him. Miles never asked what was inside. Once, when he was 9, the thought slipped out before he could stop it. "Mom, what's in the envelopes?" She turned to him so quickly he flinched. For a split second her face changed. Something sharp, something almost scared. But then just as fast she smiled. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart," she said, smoothing his hair. "Just a little business. Now remember, this stays between us." And so Miles never asked again. But secrets don't stay. Hidden forever, and one day in a place he never expected, he would say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and everything would come crashing down. For years, the routine stayed the same. Every Friday night, just before bed, Miles would slip on his sneakers, take the envelope from his mother, and walk to the black car at the corner. The window would roll down just enough for the pale hand to appear, waiting. Miles would hand over the envelope, and within seconds, the car would disappear into the night. It never changed. Not once, until the night it did. Miles was 9 now, and he barely thought about the errand anymore. But this time something felt different. The black car was there, but the man inside was late, rolling down the window. For the first time, Miles hesitated before approaching. A strange, uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. Finally, the window cracked open. The hand emerged, just like always. Miles reached out to pass the envelope, but the hand didn't take it right away. It just hovered there, fingers twitching slightly. Then the man spoke. "Your mom," he said, voice low and rough. "She ever talk about me?" Miles froze. The man had never spoken before, not once. "No," Miles answered quickly. The fingers snapped the envelope from his grasp. The window rolled up. The car sped off faster than usual. Miles stood there, heart pounding. That had never happened before. Why would the man care if his mother talked about him? Why did it feel like a warning? When he got home, his mother was waiting in the kitchen, drying dishes. She glanced up as he walked in, eyes flicking to his empty hands. "Everything okay?" she asked. Miles nodded, but something in his face must have given him away. His mother set the dish down and crouched in front of him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Miles," she said, her voice softer now. "Did the man say anything to you?" Miles hesitated. He thought about the question, about the way the man's voice had sounded. Something told him not to repeat it. "No," he lied. His mother searched his face for a moment. Then she smiled, brushing his hair back. "Good boy," she whispered. "Go wash up for bed." Miles obeyed, but as he climbed under the covers, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, for the first time in years, he dreamed about the black car. For years, the routine stayed the same. Every Friday night, just before bed, Miles would slip on his sneakers, take the envelope from his mother, and walk to the black car. At the corner, the window would roll down just enough for the pale hand to appear, waiting. Miles would hand over the envelope, and within seconds, the car would disappear into the night. It never changed. Not once, until the night it did. Miles was 9 now, and he barely thought about the errand anymore. But this time something felt different. The black car was there, but the man inside was late, rolling down the window. For the first time, Miles hesitated before approaching. A strange, uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. Finally, the window cracked open. The hand emerged just like always. Miles reached out to pass the envelope, but the hand didn't take it right away. It just hovered there, fingers twitching slightly. Then the man spoke. "Your mom," he said, voice low and rough. "She ever talk about me?" Miles froze. The man had never spoken before, not once. "No," Miles answered quickly. The fingers snapped the envelope from his grasp. The window rolled up. The car sped off faster than usual. Miles stood there, heart pounding. That had never happened before. Why would the man care if his mother talked about him? Why did it feel like a warning? When he got home, his mother was waiting in the kitchen, drying dishes. She glanced up as he walked in, eyes flicking to his. "Empty hands. Everything okay?" she asked. Miles nodded, but something in his face must have given him away. His mother set the dish down and crouched in front of him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Miles," she said, her voice softer now, "did the man say anything to you?" Miles hesitated. He thought about the question, about the way the man's voice had sounded. Something told him not to repeat it. "No," he lied. His mother searched his face for a moment. Then she smiled, brushing his hair back. "Good boy," she whispered. "Go wash up for bed." Miles obeyed, but as he climbed under the covers, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, for the first time in years, he dreamed about the black car. For as long as Miles could remember, his mother had been calm, steady, the kind of person who never seemed rushed, never let things slip. But lately something was different. At first it was subtle, small changes that Miles barely noticed. She checked the front window more often, peering through the blinds as if expecting someone. She started locking the doors earlier in the evening, and then there was the phone. She used to let it ring if she was busy, but now she answered every call on the first ring, stepping into another room to talk in hushed tones. Miles didn't understand, but he could feel it. Something was wrong. One night, about a month after the man in the black car first spoke to him, Miles woke up to the sound of voices. His parents were arguing in the kitchen. That wasn't unusual. They had been fighting, more and more lately. But this time, something about the tone of their voices made him sit up in bed, heart pounding. Carefully, he slipped out of his room and crept down the hall, stopping just before the doorway. "You think I don't know?" His father's voice was sharp, angry. "You think I don't see what's going on?" "Lower your voice," his mother hissed. "Miles is sleeping." "No, you lower your voice, Claire. You've been lying to me." "For how long?" "Huh? Months? Years?" A heavy silence. Miles held his breath. "You're being paranoid," his mother said finally. "Am I?" his father shot back. "Because I know about the money, Claire. I know about the envelopes." Miles's stomach dropped. His mother's voice was quieter now, but still sharp. "You don't know anything." "I know enough," his father said, "and so do other people." For the first time there was fear in his mother's voice. "What did you do?" Miles couldn't see their faces, but he could feel the tension in the air, thick and dangerous. His father didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and cold. "It's only a matter of time now." Miles didn't understand what any of it meant. But as he crept back to his room, heart hammering, he realized one thing. His father wasn't just angry. He was scared. And whatever was coming, it was coming soon. The days that followed were tense. The house, once filled with the warmth of family routines, now felt cold, like a place where no one trusted each other. Miles noticed the way his father watched his mother, quiet, calculating, and the way his mother avoided his father, always one step ahead as if expecting something to happen. Then, one Friday night, everything changed. It started like any other. Miles was sitting in the living room flipping through a comic book when his mother called him into the kitchen. "Sweetie, it's time," she said, holding out the envelope. Her smile was tight, her hands gripping the paper just a little too hard. Miles hesitated. The uneasy feeling from the past few weeks hadn't gone away. If anything, it had grown stronger. "Mom," he said slowly, "why do I have to do this? Why can't you?" His mother's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Something like fear. "Because I need you to, honey," she said softly. "Just like always, it's important." That word. Important. Miles took the envelope, but the uneasiness didn't leave him. As he walked out the front door, the night air felt colder than usual. The black car was there waiting, just like it always was, but something felt off. The street was too quiet. The usual hum of the neighborhood, the distant sound of a TV, the occasional passing car, was gone. It was as if the whole world was holding its breath. He reached the car, gripping the envelope tightly. The window rolled down. The pale hand reached out. Miles hesitated. The man inside noticed. For the first time he moved, just enough for Miles to see a sliver of his face in the dim streetlight. A sharp jawline, eyes that watched him too closely. "Something wrong, kid?" the man asked. Miles swallowed hard. His fingers loosened, and the envelope slipped from his grasp into the man's waiting hand. The window rolled up. The car didn't move right away. For a few long seconds it just sat there. Then finally it pulled away, disappearing into the night. Miles turned back toward his house, his stomach twisting, and that's when he saw them. Two men in dark coats, standing near the trees across the street, watching. One of them lifted a phone to his ear. The other took a slow step forward. Miles didn't know who they were, but deep down, he knew. They weren't supposed to be there. Miles ran home faster than ever before, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He didn't know who the men were, but he knew one thing. They had been watching him. Watching the black car, something was very, very wrong. As soon as he stepped inside, he slammed the door shut and locked it. His mother, who had been pacing in the kitchen, spun around at the noise. "Miles," she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "What happened?" Miles hesitated. He thought about the men, about the way they had stood so still, watching. He thought about the warning in his father's voice the night he argued with his mother, and suddenly he didn't know what to say. "Nothing," he muttered, forcing himself to breathe normally. His mother studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Go wash up for bed, sweetheart." But Miles couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. The black car, the envelopes, his mother's secrecy, his father's anger, the men in the street, it was all connected, but how? The answer came the next morning. He woke up to shouting, his father's voice loud and furious. "How dare you put him in the middle of this?" Miles bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. He ran to the top of the stairs. In the living room, his father stood near the front door, his face red with rage. His mother stood on the other side of the room, arms crossed, but Miles could see the tension in her posture. "Keep your voice down," she snapped. "He'll hear you." "Oh, he's already involved, Claire," his father yelled, throwing his hands up. "Because of you." Miles had never seen his father this angry before. His mother, usually so controlled, wasn't backing down. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said coldly. His father laughed bitterly. "Don't I? The money, the envelopes, who do you think you're fooling?" The air felt thick, suffocating. "We're done, Claire," his father said finally, his voice quieter now but no less furious. "I'm filing for divorce." A heavy silence followed. Miles' mother didn't flinch. She didn't beg him to stay, she just stood there, staring. "Do what you have to do," she said. His father stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Miles gripped the stair railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. Black car. the men in the street, his father's rage. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just about the divorce, it was bigger. And somehow, Miles was in the middle of it. The divorce moved fast. Within days, Miles' father had moved out, leaving the house quieter, emptier. But the silence wasn't peaceful, it was tense. His mother was always on edge now, checking her phone constantly, peeking out the window, locking the doors even in the middle of the day. And then, the worst part. Miles was told he would have to go to court. "It's just a small thing, sweetheart," his mother reassured him, kneeling beside him with a forced smile. "They just want to ask you some questions about your schedule, about home. It's nothing to worry about." But Miles did worry, because his father had looked at him differently ever since that last fight. And his mother, she had started acting like she was running out of time. The day of the hearing, Miles sat stiffly in the courtroom, his hands folded in his lap. The air smelled like polished wood and paper, and the voices of lawyers droned on. In the background, he didn't understand half of what was being said. All he knew was that his father and mother weren't even looking at each other. Then his name was called. His stomach twisted as he was led to the stand. The judge was kind, her voice steady, asking him simple things at first: where he went to school, what time he did his homework, what his parents were like at home. Then came the questions about the routine, about Fridays. "Did your mom ever ask you to run errands for her?" the lawyer asked. Miles nodded. "Sometimes." "What kind of errands?" "I don't know, just little things." "Like what?" Miles hesitated. His mother was staring at him now, her body tense. His father, on the other side of the courtroom, was leaning forward. "Just taking an envelope to a car," Miles said slowly. "Every Friday." A silence fell over the courtroom. The lawyer froze mid-note. His father's attorney, a man with sharp features and graying hair, turned pale. His mother's breath hitched. The judge looked up. "Can you repeat that?" Miles, confused by the sudden shift in the room, did as he was told. "Every week I gave my mom's envelope to the man in the black car. She told me never to ask about it." His mother stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The opposing lawyer whispered something to Miles's father, whose face changed from shock to something darker, realization. Then, chaos. People were talking all at once. Lawyers were flipping through papers. The judge banged her gavel, demanding order. But all Miles could see was his mother. She had gone pale. Her hands were shaking. And for the first time in his life, Miles saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Not anger. Not frustration, fear. Miles sat frozen, his heart pounding as the courtroom erupted into chaos around him. His mother had always told him to keep the envelopes a secret. He had never questioned why. But now, seeing the way everyone was reacting, seeing the fear in her eyes, he knew. This wasn't just about the divorce. The judge called for order, her gavel striking the wood sharply. Lawyers scrambled to adjust their strategies, whispering urgently among themselves. Miles's father leaned toward his attorney, his expression dark, demanding answers. And then, his mother did something unexpected. She turned and ran. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Claire pushed past the wooden barrier, heading for the exit. A bailiff moved quickly to stop her, but she dodged, nearly knocking over a chair in her rush. "Mum?" Miles called, his voice small, uncertain. But she didn't look back. Two uniformed officers were already at the door. They caught her just as she reached it, grabbing her arms firmly. "Let me go," she hissed, struggling, her composed mask finally breaking. "Mrs. Carter, you need to remain in court," one of the officers said. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for an escape, but there was none. Slowly, as if the fight had drained from her, she stopped resisting. Her shoulders slumped. Miles' father stood up. "I knew it," he muttered, shaking his head. "I knew you were hiding something." The opposing attorney, finally regaining his composure, turned to the judge. "Your Honor, in light of this testimony, I request an immediate inquiry into the financial records of Mrs. Carter." The words hit Miles like a brick. Financial records? He thought about all those envelopes, about the secrecy. Had his mother been hiding money? Doing something illegal? The judge nodded. This is a serious allegation. I'm ordering a full investigation into the nature of these transactions. Court is adjourned until further notice." With one final strike of the gavel, everything was set into motion. Miles sat numbly as officers escorted his mother away, her hands now restrained in front of her. She wasn't yelling anymore, she wasn't fighting, she only looked at him. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. Then she was gone, and Miles was left sitting in the middle of a courtroom, realizing that he had just destroyed his mother's life. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what else we have in store for you. Life is full of twists, secrets, and shocking truths, just like this one. So if you love gripping stories that make you feel every emotion, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload, and let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Miles's place? We'll see you in the next story. Stay curious, stay watching,